Hello and welcome to another episode of DCU Daily. And today we're talking about Superman Legacy. Well, it's big news. We finally have a picture with the cast all together. It's something that we've been waiting for. At this point, it feels like years, but it's definitely been at least months because a few months ago we were hearing about things like, Nicholas Hoult has been cast as Lex Luthor. We are going to have the engineer from the Authority in this movie, things of that nature. Metamorpho. So we have had a lot of character announcements, casting announcements. We have seen things from James Gunn about like what his vision for the character is. He has shared some concept art, although mostly comic book panels. But now we're starting to get some real juicy detail. This is the kind of detail that we have been actually waiting for a very long time. And is to get into all of that, and maybe even we'll talk about the Superman crest, what that's going to look like in this iteration of the character in the DCU. And then we're going to also talk about the show Superman and Lois, how that connects to this whole situation. Or at least how one of the executives at CW implied it connects. So to talk about that and so much more today, as always, of course, I've got with me John. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. This news was definitely bigger than you would think. The first thing that caught people's attention was the group photo that James Gunn posted on all of his social media, Threads, Instagram, all that. So that was definitely exciting. Just seeing all of them together. But the big, like, obviously, David Cornsweet, Rachel Brosnahan, Nicholas Holt, all the people that have been confirmed, awesome. But there's a little tidbit that I thought was interesting, and James Gunn did mention him by name, and that was the character of Otis, who, if you are a big Christopher Reeve fan, is the infamous bumbling henchman that was played famously by Ned Beatty. And depending on who you are, that could be a very good thing, a very bad thing. I mean, James Gunn himself has mentioned many a times how it will be influenced by the Reeve films, because that is kind of the epitome of like great Superman stories. Well, mainly the first one, and that's kind of it. But it's that influence that a lot of people are kind of going for. And I know some people might not be happy with that, because it's like, well, there's other iterations of Superman that need just as much limelight as the Reeve version. But even then, I feel like that's kind of exciting, because um I don't know, it's just like I think that character can be done. I would like to see what they would do in a modern context. The most we've gotten is the character of Otis Graves in Supergirl, who kind of had like the same, like, not really intelligent, kind of an idiot, very much,
Yeah, yeah,
a
it's fair. That's
just like kind of a lackey for Lex Luthor. But they made him the brother of Mercy Graves, which was like kind of an interesting idea. But yeah, he's in the picture. He's played by Terrence Rosemore, and he's right in between, Corn Sweat and Holt in the group photo, in addition to everyone else. So that's a little exciting. Like, it showcases that, that influence that Gunn has claimed many a times is the main influence for this for his version, and as well as everybody else who's been confirmed: Fillion, Holt, Gisondo, Merced, Brosnahan, even Sarah Sampaio, I believe that's how you pronounce her name. If I'm pronouncing it wrong, I apologize, as Tessmacher, who, again, another character that was invented for the original Superman film, and will be who has shown up in other, a little bit more than Otis. She's shown up in I think she, like, a version of her showed up in Smallville, um, as well as a couple other versions. But yeah, so we get a little bit of, of that Reeve influence, so that's kind of exciting, as well as seeing them all together. It's like, it's nice to see, like, just sort of that slight step closer of what we're all excited to see, is them finally, start filming. So that's definitely exciting. I really like that. But
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it's great to see that. It's great to see the cast together because up until now it's kind of like that pandemic effect, right? Where you hear these announcements. You obviously, every time they announce like, okay, so they cast Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor, you see them showing you pictures of red carpet premieres and stuff. But it's different to see the cast come together. It makes it the whole project feel more tangible. It feels alive, like, okay, finally this is happening. And I mean, look, I know we have mentioned it when we were um we've talked about, like, a few days, I think it was last week or earlier this week, we're talking about the Superman suit. And we always mention it while we are on air, like, I wonder when we're gonna get some table read and, like, some cast photos, some behind the scenes action and stuff like that. And of course, you had Nathan Fillion kind of teasing that the table reads were gonna start happening this week.
right,
And so we were like, okay, well, here we go. Like, like, whenever we're gonna get that big photo, and I keep pointing back to the whole Star Wars: The Force Awakens. Everybody comes together in this big warehouse, as kind of in a space, and you have this massive table read. And these kind of table reads with such a big cast generally take place in large spaces, a conference room, some kind of
right.
warehouse. I mean, they look like they're on the back lot there at Warner Brothers.
Hmm.
Or it's always good to see, like, there's a tangibility to the project at that point, because you start to see it. Okay, they're on set. It's not going to be what was the name of the Nicolas Cage Superman movie? Superman Lives, I
Superman
think it was.
lives.
Yeah, it's not gonna be one of those situations where, like, the day before they're about to shoot, the movie gets canceled. I mean, it's unlikely, unless, like, Warner Brothers Discovery, like, went under all of a sudden. But it does definitely, add a lot to that. And now that you see them together, like, the biggest surprise is, looking at this picture for me. I mean, bar none, the biggest surprise was, okay, Nicholas Hoult is really coming to the bit already, and he's gone bald. Like,
Yes,
he's already
everyone.
there.
Everyone is talking about, oh my god, he's bald. It's like, yeah, almost like that's the character or something. I know, everyone went
Yeah.
insane over Jesse Eisenberg having like that weird, bob cut type of thing going on, but it's like, whatever. It's
I
fine.
mean, he
Like,
got he got there at the end
he's
of the
not the
movie,
first Lex
you
Luthor who
know?
had hair.
Yeah.
I mean, the post-crisis version had hair, and I think that was the main inspiration for the Lois and Clark version. I think John Shea was the Lex Luthor there. So it's like, we've seen him with hair, but it's like, it's cool. Okay. Like, most versions don't have hair, so obviously he wouldn't have
Yes.
hair. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, and also, let's kind of switch focus a little bit, and let's talk about this, because it's not just the photo that we got of the cast. We got, like, this Isabelle Merced, or Merced. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing her last name, but she's playing Hawkgirl. I mean, she is in that Madam Web movie as one of the various web characters. So going from that to then working on this. I mean, she was actually promoting Madam Web, I think, on the red carpet or something, and she was asked, and I think she had brought up that her costume fittings
yeah, her
were
costume for her
happening.
helmet
And
specifically.
oh,
Yeah.
hell yeah, yeah, for her character and for Hawkgirl. And she mentioned, like, hey, the experience that she had on the set of Madam Web, she was kind of using that to kind of provide better feedback, because you obviously want to be comfortable in these things. Like, you spend hours getting ready, and then but you're then going to be wearing those suits for however many hours, like 8, 10, 12-hour days. And so you definitely want to make sure the fittings are good. And these costumes always have multiple iterations. You have, of course, the ones that are meant to look good on camera, the ones that are meant to help you move more easily. So, speaking of costumes, there's, of course, now we finally have a glimpse at the version of the Superman logo, the crest, the famous
Yes.
S
That's
that we're gonna see.
not a ton of people have been
So
talking. I mean, Twitter's going insane, but like outside of that, not a lot of everyone's
yeah,
like posting about the group photo, which like fair because again, as we said, that's a big step. But like honestly, I think the logo is more exciting. That's way more exciting because I don't have it next to me. I have it on my shelf over there, but my, Kingdom Come book that seems like where it's direct. Although I believe Grant Morrison also used it for the Superman and the Authority thing, which I assume, he's also deriving it. But yeah, you know what? Fuck it. I'll go grab it. But
yeah,
yeah,
I mean, it's,
it's
as
definitely
far as, like, the logo goes, like, we have seen
uh obviously
James Gunn
Grant
share
Morrison
images about this before. Like,
big enough
he's sort
fan
of
of
hinted at Kingdom Come as like
using it
his
all that.
inspiration, right? So
But it just goes to show how big of a fan I am because I
yeah.
don't have one version. I have two versions. Uh, but yeah, I got But yeah, I have both. I have the original version and then I have the deluxe version. But yeah, obviously famously the Kingdom Come logo right there. And then Superman and the Authority was another one that used it, but obviously this would be the more famous version. But I'm rambling a bit. Sorry. I just, when it comes to Kingdom Come, it's just like, damn, that's really exciting because that could be teasing what, in terms of, well, outside of, Brandon Routh on screen right now, we haven't really seen the Kingdom Come logo a lot in live action. I think this is the only, version we've seen. So maybe the guy who teased it on Twitter, I think a couple months back by this point, um was like something you've never seen before, which isn't totally correct, but in terms of not seeing it a ton, it's this, and that's definitely really like, I'm genuinely, if this is the way they're going to go, that's interesting. And now, of course, as I mentioned, with Twitter exploding, there's a whole bunch of theories on like, are he's like, instead of coming out of retirement, like instead of an older Superman coming out of retirement, he's gonna be a young Superman who hasn't really done a ton. He's like kind of like what he was in like Smallville, the red blue blur type of thing, where he's not really known as a big superhero. Maybe he kind of sort of is. Like maybe he does have the name of Superman, but yeah, he hasn't really shown a lot. He only does like small, like the typical petty theft, rescuing cats out of trees type of thing. Like the smaller stuff like that wouldn't be like Brainiac level ending threats, but enough that he has a name. And then he's inspired by, like, maybe, I know we've talked about this a lot, was like Justice League International, because it seems like James Gunn is being inspired by that run in the late 80s and early 90s with that, because he added Maxwell Lord in the movie, and it teased that he's not going to be the villainous Maxwell Lord like he is more that modern interpretation, but more so the original version, where he was like kind of just like a guy in the background who funded who funded the new Justice League International, and that. So it seems like the way that they're positioning is this version of Superman, it's not going to be like the typical S. They are going to go for more of the it's like the crest of the House of Crest, the House of El Crest. Sorry, can't talk.
Yeah,
Which
I
I
mean,
like. I
but
do
they did
like.
that in Man of Steel too. Isn't that how they
Yes,
explained
but
it? The
it's
whole
that was more like, that looked like an S. That was like, okay, let's, which is funny because there was like a bunch of behind the scenes stuff of like, oh, we tried to make it so that, oh, it looked believable as like a crest of a like of a house or a family. And they were like, yeah, we couldn't really figure out a way to do it that didn't look like an S. So we're like, decided ultimately to just make it an S. It's like, you had Kingdom Come, like you had that sort of where it still kind of looks like an S, like if you look at it like in the right area, and then but then having like that sort of like surrealness where it's not really an S. So like you could do that. Like they could have done that, but I guess they wanted more still that traditional sense. Um, but yeah, like the Kingdom Come, that's so exciting because it brings in like, okay, is it going to be inspired by Kingdom Come, or is it like, okay, this is just something to differentiate between, like all the other versions, and to really make it its own thing? Because the only thing we've gotten was Brandon Routh, and it was only pretty much a glorified cameo in Crisis on Infinite Earths. So like, okay, let's introduce a Superman from the get-go that is using this like Kingdom Come-esque crest that maybe has something to do with his Kryptonian heritage, because that's another thing James Gunn said. He said that this is going to be a Superman that is a very human Superman who's really starting to like realize he is a man of two worlds, where he is that like dealing with that Kryptonian sort of like heritage. And so maybe he is using an S early on in the movie as like, I'm Superman, I'm using S. But then in order to get more in line with that Kryptonian heritage, when he really comes out as like this guy who's like inspired by these characters to really do good in sort of a big level threat, then he can introduce like, oh, I'm going to be in line with my Kryptonian heritage, and then use the crest of L, and doing that. That is kind of, yeah, it's kind of like a little bit like that, but that's doesn't really have the top part, and it's more like the diagonal S
Yeah, I
part.
was
But
gonna
yeah, it's
mention
like,
because there's an authority connection in this movie too, right? So
right, of
I'm
course.
wondering how that plays into that too.
So
What do
yeah,
you
I think
yeah.
I think that's definitely something. Uh but yeah, that I think the main thing is Kingdom Come, because Kingdom Come is just so. I think obviously it's both, because there's a
Right,
reason that the Authority or at least the Engineer is going to be in this movie. There is going to
right.
be the Authority, like, starting out,
Yeah.
or maybe they have like a international team. And here, okay, quick theory, just super quick theory. Now, in the comics, in the Wildstorm comics, the Stormwatch was the original like team from the like Wildstorm's Justice League, quote unquote, that start out as a UN sanctioned super team, and like morally ambiguous type of thing. So they have that. So they have Stormwatch. So they have, I think they're going to do that here. And they're going to have Mr. Terrific, Hawkgirl, Guy Gardner, the Engineer, and maybe some other heroes that are like smaller or something like that. But maybe those four. And they're not the Authority yet, but they're kind of starting to get there. And maybe something happens where morally ambiguous things start to happen, and the Engineer is willing to go take that extra step of like killing people to get to the
Yeah, where
needs
she's
of the
like the
men, yeah,
ends
way the needs of the
justify the
future thing.
means, and
Yes, ends justify the means, that kind of thing.
yeah.
But Guy Gardner, Mr. Terrific, and Hawkgirl are like, no, and no, we can't do that. So Maxwell Lord
So
funds this precursor team, but then he like gets rid of the Engineer, and the Engineer goes off and starts her own team, or like is inspired by all these other
yeah.
people, and she starts her own team, and then they
I mean,
go
I can see
toe
that. You
to
know
toe
what
with
the other thing
Superman, and then you have Justice League International. I think that's an interesting. That's just a theory. So I
that's a
think that's
good
an interesting way to
theory.
do it.
I mean, look, you're putting the pieces together in a way that, like, when you go into your fan theories and they like completely just spark my imagination most of the time. And I think like what you just said there makes a lot of sense because the pieces are there, they connect. Obviously, there's more than one way to put the pieces together, but I'm sorry, yeah, because then I would wonder, like, is the engineer more powerful than those other characters? Does the engineer become the foe that Superman has to sort of take down, or is it some other third party? Because we obviously have Lex. I don't think Lex Luthor is the villain of this movie. It just wouldn't. It would
No,
be a bad move to do it. Period. Like, because you want to, at least like what they were trying to do with the Joker in the DCEU. They were like, we've had so many Joker movies where Joker shows up, and by the end of the movie, the Joker's out of the picture. The Jared Leto Joker was meant to kind of be like he's forever gonna fight Batman, kind of a Joker, right? So he was gonna stick around. I think they want to do a similar approach with Lex Luthor. So if you don't have Lex Luthor as the villain, and of course you have the now what you just pitched to me, this would be a very compelling story. It's
yeah,
almost um it has connections to like Civil War, even like on the Marvel side. Although like let's not go there. But we're talking DC. But like and even there's even the wrinkle of like regardless of whether the engineer is the villain or not, there's a wrinkle of Maxwell Lord. He starts out as the good guy, but like we find out that a lot of that is very superficial. His plans are really not all that sincere. And of course, we know Sean Gunn. I mean, who Deadline confirmed is going to be playing Maxwell Lord. James Gunn hasn't officially said it. And I'm a big fan of Sean Gunn, going all the way back to like Gilmore Girls with the character of Kirk. I'm like, is yeah. And I was recently watching some episodes, and it's just top-notch stuff. And of course, I loved him as but he played Kraglin in Guardians of the Galaxy, right? So I think that was his character's name. He did an amazing job with that too, and of course he ends up with taking on the mantle with the arrow. I'm trying to pull up the cast picture here, but he's not in this picture, which is fine. Like we don't know how much of a role he's gonna have, but I do wonder like how like Lex Luthor is gonna fit into the picture. How much of those traditional characters that I mean, there's all these are traditional characters. Certainly, like
Right.
Skylar Gazondo, for example, like he's playing Jimmy Olsen that we haven't really seen, and like other than the Supergirl show had like a very different version of Jimmy Olsen, but
Very different. Yes.
and that's
He was
nothing to
more
do with
like
like
he kind of like matured, grew out of like the
mature. Like it was
nerdy
like
sort of thing, and I'm the cool
yeah,
guy now. It's like no, you're not.
exactly. I mean,
I'm
and to be fair,
James now. I'm not
yes.
Jimmy. It's like all right,
He was I mean, okay, he was cooler in that world than that world Superman. And I was like, it's kinda like, that character had more progression. But I'm
yeah.
getting distracted. The point I was trying to make is like I'm it's starting to kinda like you're starting to see the pieces come together, and it's definitely starts to look like this is gonna be a world that's very much gonna be alive, even if Maxwell Lord's character has just got a small cameo and he's really just in the background. I mean, again, they're setting up like future storyline. They're setting up the
Hmm.
something where I think ultimately with James Gunn, like looking at this photo, it reminds me a lot about Guardians of the Galaxy in many ways, where Guardians of the Galaxy was a team movie. Clearly, it was a movie about a team of heroes, but he had a way of like bringing together the right actors in the right roles. Like
There was an
Zoe Sald,
idea to
yeah, it
bring
was an idea.
bring.
Well,
There was an
yes,
idea
there
to
was an
bring
idea.
these blah 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 and whatever the speech is.
And
I don't
because
have
there's
that.
a lot of parallels, right? Like you have Rachel Brosnahan here, who's got the star power, and she's playing Lois
A little
Lane.
bit, yeah,
Zoe Saldana came into Guardians of the Galaxy as an actress who had a lot of experience and star power behind her. Chris Pratt, very much a relative unknown at the time, outside of Parks and Rec, and even
yeah,
that show hadn't had its full run yet. And then of course, you have of course, in this case, David Cornsweet, who's a relative unknown, and he's
yeah,
going to be playing this big character in Superman. So I'm seeing that some of the same philosophies being applied. That's great. And I'm also starting to see like the threads that they're mapping out. This movie is going to be doing a lot to set up the universe that is to come, but meanwhile, hopefully telling us a story where Superman is at the core. And what you pitch for an idea, I think would do exactly that because it puts Superman right in the middle, and then he has to make a choice, and then everything else kind of has to like go around him. And obviously, there's an antagonistic force that's driving some of those choices. So I'm looking forward to it. Now, let's just kind of pivot quickly to a story that was out
yeah.
earlier this week, or maybe even late last week, where I
Mhm.
think it was an executive at the CW who mentioned that one of the reasons why Superman and Lois was canceled, or is being canceled after this upcoming season, is because they want to basically like, and when I say they, I'm referring specifically to, of course, Warner Brothers Discovery. And so basically, this executive laid the blame at Warner Brothers feet and said they don't want a competing product for Superman Legacy. They want Superman and Lois, which is a universally acclaimed and beloved show in many ways. They wanted to
Yeah,
sort of wrap its run, and so that people have nostalgia for it, but not are actively choosing to watch that and then make comparisons. They're going to make comparisons. They always will. Man of Steel comparisons will be made, but they don't want a competing product in the marketplace. So,
right.
what are your thoughts on the idea of that?
I think it's like I feel like the things I've seen specifically is either or. Like it's either oh it's the worst thing ever or oh it's 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 for the best. Like because I've seen people like just again kind of that black and white mentality of like either okay WB are complete morons. They don't know what they're doing. The competing that's ridiculous because we're having two Batman and two Jokers and like all this other stuff. Like what are they doing? Like this is ridiculous. This needs to go on for more time, more seasons, more everything because this show is great. Superman Legacy doesn't have a leg to stand by, blah, 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 all that stuff. But then you have the people that are like, oh, I think this is for the best because all the other CW shows ran too long and they became terrible after this point, or They don't it th- they this is, it makes sense from a business point of view. Yeah, Batman, but Superman doesn't have that much, going behind it, unlike Batman, all that. So here's my take on it. My quick take before we, end this stream is I think it's a little bit of both. Do I understand it from a business point of view? Yes, because when you think about it, when you really think about it, I hate to give WB props because I hate WB. WB is one of the worst handled studios of all time, only second to Disney. I will die on that hill no matter how excited I am for the DCU and James Gunn's vision. WB is like the one of the worst studios out there. So with that,
I mean, let's be fair
I
though. Like they have put out some of the greatest superhero movies
yeah,
of
they
all
have
time.
put out
Although maybe
I'm still shocked that
yes,
somehow Denis
despite
Villeneuve got
yes,
Dune out in
yeah,
his
yeah,
like
yeah,
complete vision. Like that's still shocking to me. But anyway, let's not get
absolutely.
that's a
Yeah.
whole another discussion
No,
for
no, I
another
mean
day.
that's not even DC, but like no, I get it. Yeah, it's
Yeah, in terms of
a whole
WB
nother
in
can of
general.
worms.
So
Yes,
here's what I think. WB sees Superman and Lois almost like a threat in a way, like in a weird way. So they
it.
see it, they're like,
Yeah,
okay, a lot of people love this show. It's, as you said, universal acclaim. Everyone was completely shocked with how great this show was
yeah,
because not a
dude.
lot of
Do
people
you
like
remember
Twilight
the first
and
trailer? Like people were thinking, okay, this is the Arrowverse. There's a lot of people,
this
and then
it's yeah, the Arrowverse was
it's
in the shitter at that point. Nobody liked Tyler Hoechlin's
yeah,
Superman. His appearances on Supergirl, which is terrible. And it's like,
yeah.
how are they gonna fucking make this work? This is gonna be hot garbage. And within the first 5 minutes of the first episode, oh no, this is gonna be the greatest Superman thing we've ever gotten in years. So, and it still rises. It has some bumps along the way, like I can't stand the Langs, but that's beside the point. Let's not get into that because I'll
I
go
don't
on a
think we're gonna
rant
get
for
much of
4 hours.
them in the new season, right? Because
Hopefully.
of budgetary concerns.
But yeah, it crazy. But anyway, so I like to think about it like, okay, WB think it they do see it as competition because when you really think about it, they no longer have a stake in CW anymore. Remember they sold all that
It's
off.
all well, to be fair, they do have a minority, but
A
it's the
little minor
tiniest
stake.
it's the
I
tiny
Not
yes,
all,
yeah.
sorry that I misspoke, but
They sold the
majority of
vast
it. I meant the
majority of it, yes.
majority.
Yeah, yeah.
They sold that off. So technically, well, yes, Superman and Lois still has the license from WB because WB owns the media rights to Superman as a character. They don't have that stake anymore. So technically, it would be like if Paramount was still making Marvel movies, but there was still a Marvel Studios. Like it would
Yes,
be kind of like that,
yes.
where it's like
And for
it's technically
context
competition by another company.
right, and for context, Paramount had the distribution rights to the
They did.
MCU until Disney bought, uh,
Yes.
Marvel, and then
The first Avengers was the first
first one that was
Disney
yeah,
led.
so before that,
Yeah.
if you even now, I think if you watch it on Disney Plus, you'll see the Paramount logo at the beginning, for the phase a lot of the phase 1 movies of the MCU.
Yes, majority of
Yeah,
phase 1 was
yeah,
Paramount. So
yeah,
so it would be kind of like that. So it's like I kind of weirdly understand like WB like okay, that is technically competition because that's not us. No, not anymore. So they're like
right.
okay, but I do still also think it's WB being like as I mentioned before, it is competition and the thing is they have a lot riding on this movie. It's the first solo Superman movie we've gotten in over a decade. It's the first movie
Yeah,
of the DCU, which they're kind of iffy on because there's not like a
yeah,
A-list star that is carrying this movie. It's a lot of smaller
yeah.
unknown people. Even Rachel Brosnahan has a lot of experience, but not
But
enough. It's not,
she's
you know,
not I think even, like, her star is not even as big as Amy Adams' star was when she
right.
was cast as Lois Lane, because she
Yeah,
had,
it's
like, more mainstream of a mainstream
of
following,
course.
and yes, Marvelous Mrs. Maisel is about as mainstream as most shows get these days, but, it's like that's the one thing that she's known
Yeah,
for. I mean,
and Nicholas
she's
Hoult
done other stuff,
does
but
have
yeah,
some stuff, but again, he's
yeah,
not like the biggest name ever.
yes,
So, there is I feel like there's a lot of shades of gray. Sure, WB is doing some ridiculous things, but it is weirdly understandable. And at the same time, I think it's kind of good that it's ending after 4 seasons because look at The
There's so many
Flash, look
shows,
at
dude.
Arrow, look at
Yeah.
Legends of Tomorrow, look at
They
Supergirl. They
they
all
overstayed their
started
welcome.
tanking after
Yeah.
like
Season
3 seasons.
3,
Like
4, maybe 4.
The
I
Flash
thought yeah, The Flash season 4 was decent. I
Flash
thought it was
season 2 is when it I
peaked.
feel like
That
season
was
3 and 4 was kinda like jagged, and then season
yeah,
5
yeah,
just tanked it.
gone, gone.
Legends of
No, I
Tomorrow
fell
got
off. I was
bad
like, "Nope,
after like
done."
3 seasons.
Yeah.
Arrow, the 3rd season was but I will say I have heard from people that also hate the Arrowverse that have said that Arrow, you know what, season 5 picked up on things, and then the whole prison
Yeah,
arc and all
yeah,
that. It did
but they
kinda got
ran
in
out
a
of fuel.
semi-decent place towards the end,
Yes,
so
yes,
I'll give them that, but even then,
yeah.
Arrowverse left a really bad taste in everyone's mouth because just how they
Oh, and the
mishandled these
whole, like,
characters and
Batwoman
all that,
situation, like
and the
that,
fact that
like
this was yeah,
yeah,
it was like, oh yeah, Batwoman was another one that just was never good.
and
So,
I mean, it
and
was just
Naomi was
yeah,
never good.
yeah.
So Gotham Knights, it was all bad. So this is the last remnant of like a dead
Yeah,
franchise. Essentially,
yeah.
it's the last
Well,
remnant.
yeah.
So they're like, I'm just glad that they got enough warning because, like, for instance, if it wasn't renewed and it didn't get a season 4 with that cliffhanger ending, that would have been problematic. But the fact that they're like, okay, yeah, we're canceling this. They're getting enough notice. They're going to have a proper ending to these characters. And I think that's a good thing. So I do think yes, WB is being dumb. However, I'm glad it's still ending outside of that decision because I think 4 seasons is a good enough wrap up. It's not going too long where it'll be really bad, all that stuff. And then on top of that, like, oh, and the last remnant I wanted to, talk about before we end this is like, well, what about 2 Batman? We have 2 Batman. It's like Batman under WB has been cranking out great movies since 1989. Meanwhile, like, sure, you have Batman and Robin, you have the iffy reception of Dark Knight Rises, and all that, but that's 2 out of what, like 7, 8 movies. Like, that's a good thing. I know Batman Forever's mixed, but that made them a lot of money. Returns was a little darker, not a ton of critical acclaim, but fan acclaim, all that. So varying degrees of success, whether that be box office, critical acclaim, or audience acclaim. So varying degrees from 1989. Now, what a lot of people don't know is yes, Warner Brothers did distribute the Christopher Reeves movies, but they did not own the rights to Superman. The Salkinds did. So they bought the rights in, I believe, I want to say 91, 92, or somewhere in the early 90s. And they, for years, wanted to make, after, the big Death of Superman arc, they're like, okay, we want to make a Death of Superman movie, hence, Superman Lives. Meanwhile, what are the only 2 solo Superman movies we've gotten under WB? Superman Returns, which, as a friend of mine has said many a times, it is not a Superman movie. It's a tribute to a Superman movie, and not even a good one at that. And then
That's a great way
Man
to
of
put it. I love
Steel,
that critique.
and then Man of Steel, which is, whether you like it or not, it is a very divisive movie. It wasn't the success that they really hoped for. They hoped it would be like Avengers level, where they got $1 billion. It would be the great return of Superman. And they're like, well, shit, it wasn't. Well, we can't stop now. So we got to make our cinematic universe now because we tried with Green Lantern. It failed. So we got to try it with Superman here. And then that was the last one we got. So we only got 2. I know some people count BVS, but we only got those 2 movies. So Batman has been cranking them out, greatness, from 1989 for almost 3, 4 decades. Meanwhile, Superman's got 2 movies that are divisive at the very best. So there's that. So if WB wants to avoid any and all competition, they're going to do it. Now, I think there's good and bad in that. Some bad of like, dumb because have more faith in your product, have more faith in the guy you hired, just have more faith in your product, man. And then, but at the same time, I'm glad it's ending because I don't want it to be like Flash season 9 or something like that. So I'm glad it's ending and we're getting an ending rather than a cancellation, quote unquote, ending. And that. So I think there's more shade of gray there, and I think people need to look at it, take a step back, and be like, okay, there's more to there than black and white, I guess.
Yeah,
So
no, that's totally fair. Look, it's ultimately I would have liked to see Superman and Lois continue because I thought the show was really hitting a stride. But like you said, it's probably not such a bad thing that they are ending it at the peak of its prime. There's not a lot of shows these days that tend to go out just at the right time. They either go out too early before, we get a proper conclusion, or they overstay their welcome. And it's rare to see a show go out on its own terms, even though, it's technically a cancellation. I think ultimately they gave them enough notice so that they can kind of build towards something, of a proper conclusion. So yeah, I mean, hey, look, Superman Legacy is coming. Guys, we're gonna be back talking about this in the days, weeks, and months to come. Plenty more news, and each time we hear something new happening, we'll be sure to bring that up and we'll discuss it, talk about the whys, where's, and when's, and the hows, and all of that stuff. But until then, keep tuning back here on DCU Daily. We love talking about DC, of course, Monday through Friday. You can come back and check us out. We're either live or we might put out something that was pre-taped, depending on, which one of us is available that day. But we do our very best to come to you with the latest news each and every day throughout the week. So until next time, go out there, check out something DC related, then come back and talk to us about it. We'd love to hear about it from you. And in the meantime, we're gonna go back and dig around for some more information on the movie, and you guys can probably do the same. And then we'll discuss it next time on DCU Daily.